So I have to understand what it's like to be you so that I can address your individual needs. When I know that, then and only then can I work towards achieving equitable allocation of resources, time, money, that love that we share, that esprit de corps within a community.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to this edition of Leading Through Unprecedented Times. I'm Tom Murray, your host, and I am fired up to have this amazing guest, somebody I am so proud to call a really good friend of mine, one of the best leaders that I know leading schools today, the one and only Calvin Watts. Dr. Watts, how you doing, sir?
I am doing so well, Tom. I cannot. I'm humbled, honored, proud superintendent of Gwinnett County Public Schools, and even more excited to be here, shared space with you today.
Yeah, well, as we start to wrap up our season here of Leading Through Unprecedented Times, I could think of no better person than to bring in you. I had the privilege of seeing you again just a couple months ago at an event that we were there, got to hear you speak, share some of the work, and I'm so excited to bring your voice to our listeners and the work that we're going to share. So dive into, if you could, just where you are now, but just give us a little bit about your journey. Just, I met you were on the West Coast in Kent School District when I originally met you. You're now back on the East Coast in the Southeast. Tell us a little bit about your educational journey, where you've been, where you are currently, demographics, because, hey, you're one of the largest districts in the country, and I want folks to be able to know that and recognize and see the scope of that. We'll dive into that as well. So just talk to us about your journey, if you would.
Wow, Tom, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me, and always an honor to share exactly who I am and really what is the work right now. I will tell you that I have the opportunity to serve as superintendent of Gwinnett County Public Schools. My wife and I, as I affectionately call it, we have 183,000 children, and that's how seriously I take this work. We have one whom we still claim on our taxes, who's actually 3,000 miles away. He grew up in Gwinnett County Public Schools from elementary to middle school, and then that was my opportunity to go back to my home state of Washington. So while I'm talking about Washington State, I'll dive into my origin story. And so while you mentioned, I am now back in the Southeast. That's really where my origin story began before I was even in existence. Both my parents have Southern roots. My dad was born in East Palatka, Florida. My mom was born in Thomasville, Georgia. And they did what is called the second migration in the late 50s, early 60s. They met, they were married, and 3 years later, I was welcomed into the world. So I was born in Seattle, raised in Bellevue when it was just a sleepy suburb. I wish we had saved the home that I grew up in. My dad bought in 1971 for $21,000. And of course, the tech hub that Bellevue is. I looked on Zillow not too long ago, and it was listed for a little more than almost 1.2 million. And we're talking about 1,800 square feet, right? So that's how much time has taken. But here's the reality. I enjoyed my time learning and growing as a leader in Washington State. I had educators in my family. I had a high reliability childhood. My mom was in the health field. Her last job on the face of this earth was as chief of disaster and health services for American Red Cross Eastern Operations. And my dad worked for Coca-Cola Bottling Company. He was in the Air Force. So I truly had a high reliability childhood. And as an only child, I recognized that if something happened in the Watts household and it wasn't my dad or my mom or our dog who did it, I couldn't blame anyone else except for myself. And so I understood what it meant to take care of self so that I could take care of others, but also to be responsible. My dad said I couldn't go outside until I cleaned up my room or cleaned the ring around the tub. And what he meant and what my parents taught me are my seminal leadership lessons. First is that, as my mom said, you have to take care of yourself for the sole purpose of taking care of others. So I knew that was going to be a part of my pathway. My dad, in his lessons, where I couldn't go down the street and play with my friends until my room was clean, his message was it's important how you enter a room. How do you make people feel? How do you greet others? But he said, most importantly, know that it's even more important how you exit a room, how you leave the room better than when you found it. How do people feel? What have they learned? How are they better as a result of you being in their midst? And so those lessons were sown into me from day one. And I recognized that the Seattle area, Washington State, was a great place to grow up. And I said, perhaps a great place to grow older. But right now, I need to move and see the world. And so I had opportunities to travel abroad. After my college years, I'm a Howard University graduate and proud Bison. And I recognized that as I finished my career at Howard, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to serve and lead young people to become better older people. And so I began my teaching career in Seattle Public Schools, taught middle grades, and taught for 2 years. I thought Seattle was going to be my home for life at that point until I was summoned by my buddies from the East Coast who said, "Hey, Calvin, it's the 90s. You've got to get out of Washington State. You need to come to the East Coast. You got to come back here." And they said, not only that, not just the East Coast, you got to come to Hotlanta. So I finished my 2 years of teaching, seminal years as a middle grades educator, sold everything except for my books and my clothes, and relocated to Atlanta, Georgia in 1994. 1 year turned into five, five turned into 21. But within those 21 years, I taught in smaller school districts, taught in Atlanta public schools, I taught in Carrollton City Schools, coached soccer, and met the love of my life, my wife in Carrollton. And as I've shared earlier, yes, we now have 183,000 children. And our one who is now a University of Washington Husky, I'll tell that story in a moment, and he's living in Seattle to this day. So always a teacher. I just happen to teach in the form of a superintendent. And I joke with the students when they ask me, well, Dr. Watts, what's a superintendent? I said, well, my parents love me so much, they intended for me to be super. So I guess it makes sense that I turned into a superintendent. I don't know. It's that wordplay. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Oh, Calvin, I love that. When thinking about it, I shared with you earlier and shared with you before we launched Future Ready Schools at the White House. President Obama kicked it off in 2014, and we started to do these summits around the country. And the reason I go back that far to share that is you were superintendent of the district when referring to Kent. We were actually sharing an example, and I hadn't met you at that point, but it had come across our desk as this kind of shining example around equity. Future Ready Schools is an equity focused organization, and you were creating these Wi-Fi kiosks and some laundromats and federally funded housing to create for access. And so part of our mission in 2014 was to raise awareness on kids that didn't have access and coming up with innovative and different ways to do it. And there we were shining a light 9 years ago on your district out there in Washington. And I had the privilege of meeting you shortly thereafter through our mutual good friend, Susan Enfield. But I share that because we were putting a spot on the work you were doing 9 years prior. And here you are all these years later and coming back. And so I love that going back home story and kind of bringing yourself back there. Another piece that I actually want to dive into, recently we had a conversation. And you were obviously AI is like all the rage, right? Like everybody's talking about AI right now. You go to a conference, you put AI on it, it's gonna be packed, right? No matter what it is, everybody wants to know. They just this new app, this new tool. But you said, Tom, have you heard of the new AI? And I paused for a minute, and I'm like, I'm still getting caught up with everything that's out there. Talk to us about what you meant, because I found it fascinating.
Yes. So when I think about artificial intelligence, the AI of the moment. Again, humbled and honored to have had the opportunity to showcase two of our incredible schools and several of our amazing leaders who are leading this work in a district that is now the 11th largest in the school district and the district that serves in a county that is the 7th most diverse in the country. And so what does artificial intelligence mean? It's not something that we need to be afraid of. It's something we need to embrace and learn from. And how do we generate new ideas? How do we create desired outcomes? And I will tell you, it has been a game changer for our students. We had Madam Secretary Cindy Martin and her team join us to visit two of our schools to focus on our Computer Science for All initiative, as well as our incredible work with regenerative artificial intelligence. And it was outstanding. Our leaders from our nation's capital were able to see students as young as first grade, third grade, coding and not only lifting up artificial intelligence and computer science for all, but most importantly, lifting up the beautiful, rich diversity that exists in Gwinnett County Public Schools, as well as the equitable allocation of resources. And so that included opportunities for us to show and showcase students who are actually going through coding exercises in the youngest grade levels of middle school and elementary, and ultimately seeing themselves as coders and calling themselves, referring to themselves as coders in the third or fourth grade. That's amazing. And so they're already thinking about themselves as individuals who will not be prepared for their future; they'll be ready for their future. And I think for jobs that exist today, but most importantly for jobs that have not yet even been created. And so we moved on from seeing students learn and actually communicate uh, in French, in Spanish, and essentially become fluent in multiple languages as they're matriculating through their elementary and middle school years. Our second visit was to Paul Duke STEM High School that is focused on STEM initiatives and STEAM initiatives, and the ability. This is part of this is my sweet spot. And so, if you were to ask me what is it about public education that I love most, well, the irony is what I love most about public education is that its inherent need to be reimagined. I have a date written on my bulletin board in my conference room. The date is April 23rd, 1635. When people say that, if they're not familiar, they'll say, "What does that date mean? That's not today." I said, "No, of course it's not today." But that date represents the date that Boston Latin was founded, our nation's oldest public school. And I met with a colleague who shared some great tips and technology, virtual reality, to help our students in one of our schools to learn how to solve algebraic equations using virtual reality means. And what she shared, she said, "You know what, Dr. Watts, I just saw that date and I thank you for sharing that with me." And she said, "You know what, I was just at Boston Latin about a month ago. And guess what? You might not be surprised that they're actually learning and conducting school in much the same way that they did in 1635. Students learning from a teacher, standing in the front of a room, sitting in desks in rows." And I said, that's fascinating. And yet, why aren't we doing something different? I said, we're the only industry on this planet that has fundamentally remained the same since its inception. And I do believe that our students, our staff, our families are ready for us to bring the future to our youngest learners and leaders so that they can be prepared and ready for the careers of their choice. So it is about AI. It's not artificial intelligence, but I'll give Chris Chapman, my good friend and colleague, who is the CEO of Kingmakers of Oakland, who we are partnering with in Gwinnett County Public Schools, and I partnered with him while I was in Kent as superintendent as well. But he said, "You know this better than most, Dr. Watts." He said, "You learned everything that you are doing from your parents." He said, "You've learned them from your ancestors, and that's why it's the new AI." When he told me this the first time, I said, "What do you mean, the new AI? Artificial intelligence?" He says, "No, you've learned this from your ancestors. So this is ancestral intelligence, and it is the most important intelligence that you will ever use." My mind was blown, and I told him from that moment, I will always give you credit anytime I share this story and every time I share this story. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that with you.
Absolutely. I have chills as you're talking about that and just seeing the experiences that are being created, for all students and just the notion of just each student giving them the opportunity that they need and deserve. Love that. One of the things that I've respected about your work so much, one of the pieces I want to dive into is really around developing meaningful strategic plans, the process around that. Because, whether both districts that you've been in most recently, very, very large, and a lot of times the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. We have all sorts of like directions we seem to be heading, which creates confusion, which can create culture issues, which can create some voices never being heard. Talk to us a little bit about work you did both in Kent, now in Gwinnett, on strategic planning, and what are some recommendations you have for school and district leaders, everything from just really its importance to ways that you're doing it to amplify voices, to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. What's that look like?
Well, thank you for that. And the opportunity is boundless and endless when you think about what a strategic plan should be and what it could be. And so, what I learned when I arrived in Kent in 2015. So, for those who may not know, and I don't know if I clearly articulated, I had actually spent 14 years in Gwinnett County Public Schools, from assistant principal to assistant and associate superintendent, prior to being tapped to lead a superintendent in Kent School District in my home state, literally 9 miles from where I grew up. And when I arrived, I asked our board, the 5-member board who hired me, uh, this most important question. I said, first of all, thank you for providing this opportunity for me to serve in what I believe is one of the most important roles in public education. I said, but I have a question for you. I said, would you rather be a team in terms of a governance structure and a governance team? Would you rather be a team of 5 plus 1 or a team of 6? And when I say that, they looked at me kind of that puppy dog, like, wait, what do you mean? What was? And I said, well, let's talk about that. I said, you are 5 board members, elected officials, and you were responsible for one of the largest school districts in Washington State, and at the time, one of the second or third most diverse at the time. I said, the reality is we're going to have to work together, and if we work together as a team, a board governance team, then it means something different if we're working together as a team of 6. That means we each have a unique set of responsibilities, a unique set of talent, skills, and abilities, and we're all working together to achieve one common goal, one purpose. And they said, well, then the answer is clear. We'd much rather be a team of 6. And so that was the beginning of our professional marriage as a board governance team. And what we set out to accomplish was really to achieve uncommon results. And I use that term still to this day, even in Gwinnett, because what is supposed to happen when school districts become larger, or they become more diverse, or they become or have more students and families who don't have greater access to means by which they can be successful. Well, research or evidence might suggest that performance is supposed to decline, or people will start to leave. And the reality is, what we were able to accomplish is really to close achievement gaps high. And we started with a strategic plan and planning process. We didn't have one when I arrived in Kent. And so we began the process through what I call a look, listen, learn entry plan. And that look, listen, learn was just that. It was me to go to each and every school, to meet with students, staff, clergy, to meet with business officials, and to ask questions. What's working well? What needs to be improved? If you could change anything about public education in Kent School District, what would that be? And we took copious notes, and we had tables and circles and conversations with individuals from all parts of Kent and the general vicinity. What we learned is that there were areas where we found that there were students who were thriving, students who were doing incredibly well because of the resources that their families and those individuals had by virtue of where they lived and zip code, to parents or family members who were gainfully employed. We also learned on the other side of that there were families who were furthest away from educational opportunity. And what I knew to be true is that there is one single solitary entity that can bridge that gap between these two ideals, and that is public education. And one that's led from a strategic and through a strategic lens that focuses and centers equity. But first of all, has to understand what empathy means. So I have to understand what it's like to be you so that I can address your individual needs. When I know that, then and only then can I work towards achieving equitable allocation of resources, time, money, that love that we share, that esprit de corps within a community. And so, to me, that was the beginning of what I would call something special that was budding and growing inside of me. That said, you know what? I understand the importance of what it meant to be a teacher, always a teacher. And as I grew through various leadership opportunities throughout, I recognized that the opportunity to serve as superintendent is an awesome responsibility. It's one that I never will take for granted. It's also one that I understand that can allow our students and families to be ever closer to what I would call that educational opportunity that we all deserve and would expect in public education.
Yeah, no, I love that. The importance of planning, setting the foundation, setting that vision. I want to dive a little bit further, just for a few moments. I love the connection between equity and empathy and your connection there. I also want to touch on the scope of the district and what it's like serving a district that's so large, one of the largest in the country. Having been a building principal, I know it can be hard to walk into a classroom. I see amazing instructional practices and thinking like, how do I expand that to other classrooms in my building? To think about it, the scope and the scale that you're working with, like what does equity look like and how do you scale to the level that you're at? And so I don't know if you want to touch on those hand in hand or separately, but what does equity look like in such a large district between access and opportunity? How do we, how do we focus on that and prioritize that? I love the lens in which we see it. And then how do we scale some of this stuff? Again, it can be a struggle to scale something in a single building, no less than I'm guessing a couple hundred buildings or whatever that looks like for you. So talk to us a little bit about that, if you could, the connection to equity and then also scaling some of the work.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Tom. And I think it begins with what's inside of me. And I know who I am, I know whose I am. And so part of that conversation that as I lead the work, and I say lead the work, but I can't do this by myself. When I talk about leadership, I often talk about the fact that as a leader, as our leader in Gwinnett County Public Schools, leading alongside our members of our board and our principals, our assistant principals, our district level leaders, our community leaders. I say there's a way to lead. And I learned from my parents, and I articulated in this way. They led in a way that taught me how to lead myself so that I could lead others. Sometimes you have to be the force in the front. You have to say, no, not now, not yet. You have to be willing to do so in the appropriate way. Sometimes you have to be a brace in the back. You have to be willing to support those, let them move forward, take those baby steps or strides that they might need, and you walk alongside them with a hand right behind them because when, not if, they fall, you'll be there to catch them if they're falling backwards. And that is the appropriate, I would call the analogy when we're leading alongside individuals who are doing something for the first time. Sometimes they might be so amazed and surprised that they, okay, I don't get this, so I might need your help. Keep me posted, right? Keep me uplifted, literally. So, and other times I had to be a guide on the side to walk literally alongside to say, you know what, I'm with you. Yes, I have a different role, and yes, I understand what my title represents. But when I take my name badge off, and when I sit down and have a cup of coffee with, a staff member, or sit down at lunch with a student, to let them know that I am there with you, and we're going to walk this journey, and it's going to be a hard journey. It's going to be a long journey, but we're going to do this together. And so that guide on the side, and really that brace in the back, that force in the front, and to me, developing relationships is at the core of what any sort of leadership next step and planning process has to engage in, because we have to move at the speed of trust. And if you don't know me, and if you don't trust me, then you're less likely to move in any way alongside and creating paths or moving along the paths that have already been created. That's what we were able to accomplish through the Look, Listen, Learn tour in Gwinnett when I arrived, because my wife reminded me, she's my counselor in chief, and she said, you know what, you were gone for 6 years. You grew up in Gwinnett. Our son was born in Georgia, and he grew up in Gwinnett to sixth grade. Remember, she said, people will think they know you because they knew you. Once again, so I've got so many leaders around me and family members and loved ones. They just give me these nuggets that and I said, wait a minute, people will think they know you because that's right. I spent 14 years here, but they have no idea of the fundamental shifts and changes in leadership acumen that I gathered and held on to during my 6 years in Kent School District. So she reminded me that I'm going to have to reintroduce myself. So I said, let me reintroduce myself. My name is Calvin Watts. And we talked about targeted universalism. He said, what is that? I said, we talked about curb cutting, the notion of a 1940s mid 1940s, when individuals from World War I were coming back, and they were coming back injured in in wheelchairs and on crutches, and someone said, we've got to make curb cuts to give access to these individuals, because downtowns were burgeoning all over city centers across this country. And when they started making those curb cuts, Tom, uh, what happened? Workers who were there said, "Why are we wasting all this money on curb cuts? These people, they won't be able to benefit from this, and they're on crutches, and they're in wheelchairs. And why are we doing this?" And here's what I learned. What I learned is not how we're treating for those who are going to benefit today, but those who benefit tomorrow. Because what we do for those who suffer the most will always benefit those who suffer the least. And so what that had when I shared that with our team of leaders, and we have 142 schools, so we have literally hundreds of administrators amongst our principals and sister principals who meet with me and our team each month. And so I have that opportunity to share kind of a sermon on the mount, but also opportunity to talk about what's next for Gwinnett County Public Schools. And so to engage our leaders, we've talked about what that means. And so curb cutting, they thought it was a waste of money, a waste of time, until they recognized that, yes, this opportunity supports those who are in wheelchairs, but it also, as downtowns became more populated, it also benefited whom? It benefited those who were rolling strollers with their young children, or when they, I don't know, did you ever roller skate? I did. Well, did you ever try and transition from a sidewalk to a curb while jumping down if you weren't really safe? Well, the curb cut would allow for a smooth transition. Or what about riding your bike or a skateboard, and the list goes on. And so that is a perfect analogy of what it means to address needs when those needs arise. And so uh, light bulbs were going off, eyes were opened, and you could see that just simple analogies when I shared with them. We talked about diversity, Tom, and this was the initial. And I said, okay, this is going to be the litmus test. Do they really trust me? Because they think they know me, because they knew me. And I said, we're going to talk about diversity. One of our goals in our strategic planning process, because we're going to lead with empathy first. First, I need to first understand what it's like to be you to the extent possible. And until then, I cannot address individual needs if I don't know who you are. So empathy leads to equity. Equity leads to effectiveness. Effectiveness is obviously achieving those results that we desire. Because if you do nothing, we talk about desired results each and every day. Because if you do nothing, you'll get results. So desired results are our goal. And the fourth E of our four E's is excellence, that notable standard to which we should all aspire. That bridge from empathy to excellence is the beginning of our journey together. And that became the impetus for our strategic plan, which is referred to as our blueprint for the future. So we're just getting started. At the same time, we're hitting a stride, and the culture is shifting. We have leaders at all levels, some who were less enthusiastic, but now we are seeing more who are saying, Dr. Watts, I hear this more than often, more times than not, that this is the right work. And it doesn't diminish the fact that we weren't doing this, while I was here in previous iteration. But the reality is, when they talked about the words that were seemingly controversial, well, what does equity mean? And the best way that I shared with them was the shoe analogy. And I said, before I told them we were going to talk about equity, Tom, I said, we're going to finish this meeting today, and I want to let you know that outside the room, in the hallway, Johnny, Susie, Jen, Jim, give me your favorite tennis shoe. What's your favorite tennis shoe brand? Of course, everyone says something: Nike, Adidas, Puma, whatever. And I said, well, what if I told you that you're going to have a pair of shoes outside, Nikes, Air Jordans? I made sure, because I love you, they're going to be one pair of shoes. The newest, latest Jordan shoes are outside in a box, ready for you as soon as the meeting's over. So as soon as we're done, you can go outside, pick up your box, you can take it home. They're like, what? Is he kidding? Is he serious? No. I said, no, really. Wink, wink. I said, when you go outside, you can get your box and you come back in, you can try them on. And I will tell you, I got everyone Air Jordans size 14 men. And they look at me like, wait, what? What? Wait, you're not happy? These are Jordans. These are $200 pair of shoes. You don't like those? Oh, so tell me why you don't like them. Well, Dr. Watts, I don't wear a size 14. I wear a size 9 in women's, or I wear a size 10. I said, oh, okay. So wait, so I was, you know what? I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about equality. My bad. So we're talking about equity, and yes, you're right. That means if I get the same size shoe for everyone, someone is going to be disappointed. Why is that? And they got it because that was the seminal uh, you know lesson for the day. How do we transition from empathy to equity to effectiveness to excellence, and how do we teach in a way that lets people know this is not something to be afraid of. This is something we should embrace. It's reality. And I shared with some of our teachers who happen to not reflect my dimension of difference, and some of our teachers who happen to be white, and they said, Dr. Watts, you talk about diversity in our educator workforce. Does that mean you don't want white teachers in our schools? And I said, time out. Did you hear me say that? No. I said, no, I didn't say that. There's a reason why I didn't say that, because you reflect diversity as well, just as I do. I said, and there's a role model effect. I learned this during my principalship in one of my principalships in Gwinnett, that the role model effect, it actually crystallized what I always believed, uh, that that I don't have to look like you to be your advocate. But if I don't see images of me in positions of power or authority or influence, how will I ever know that I can be me in those roles? And that's what diversity uh, provides us an opportunity for us not only to do, to see, but to be. And that's been really the seminal building blocks that we're setting up now for our journey that's just getting started in Gwinnett County Public Schools.
Oh my gosh, my friend, in the last 10 minutes, you have dropped so many gems of wisdom. Kudos to your brilliant wife, by the way, CEO at home for sure, right? And her brilliance and a good man listening to her and her counsel, which was incredible there. But so many incredible analogies around equity and all the different facets that you just shared. Since we're almost out of time, I've got one more question for you. As here we are this summer, looking forward to another school year ramping back up, people getting fired back up. They've had a bit of a break. No matter if it's a teacher listening or a 35-year superintendent that's listening, give me one piece of advice as they kick off this new year, something that you've got for them that you'd give them moving forward.
Mm. Well, first and foremost, thank you again for this opportunity. And if I could give any piece of advice, it would be first, if even if you are a veteran in your district or your classroom, wherever you're serving, make sure you continue to look, to listen, and to learn. I began that as my entry process, but I said, I'm going to have to make sure that I keep this process going because there's never a time, is there really a time that we should stop looking and listening and learning as a leader? I would say there's never a time where that's an appropriate action. And so continue to pay attention to those who are around you. Let them know that you care, that they see you first as a human being. They see you first as a person and then as a leader. And I would also offer that if you're going to create opportunities for strategic planning processes, if you're moving in a different direction in terms of a curricular initiative or maybe a new way of leading or helping students grow and achieve, make sure you bring those whom you are going to be impacting along with you on that journey. And I could not emphasize even more that I learned a great deal of important lessons in Kent, especially working in a strong union state. One of those that I learned was calling people in, Tom, and we do a lot of calling out, and I recognize that post COVID, people were hurting. There's a lot going on in this divisive culture wars and across the country, but I move that to the side and I say, you know what, I'm not calling people out. I'm calling people in so that we create a circle and have a fairly long table in my conference room that has about 12 chairs around it. And so even if I had enough room to fit two more chairs at the end and of each end of the table, I could only fit, literally, 16 chairs, and that's all. But if we stand up outside and we stand up and stand in circle and shared space and we share ideas and conversations, if anyone wants to join, all we need to do is to take one step back. And exponentially, the circle widens so that anyone who wants to be a part of this and this outstanding journey that we're on in Gwinnett, and there are quite a people who want to be a part of it. And I just say that to me is probably one of the best lessons that I've learned and the ones that I continue to teach to this day. Always a teacher, just happen to serve as superintendent, and I love it.
And there is no better way to wrap up the podcast with some of those words right there. My man, it is good to see you. Thank you so much so much for today. Everybody, that is the one and only Dr. Calvin Watts. Dr. Watts, my brother, I appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. All the best. Stay in touch. Talk to you soon.